Hey, BSP fans. Thanks for tuning into the latest episode of our Black Swamp podcast. We appreciate your listening and support. If you've been keeping up on our episodes and like what you're hearing, please help spread the word by telling friends, colleagues, and music lovers of all ages. If you missed the previous episode, we released a special BSP Q&A, where BSP employees and friends answered questions from you, the podcast listeners. Eric chatted about some BSP history. You got to meet the Black Swamp team. Dan Smithiger helped answer a question or two about the BSP showcase, and we dug into some product development inquiries. Overall, a fun time. Before we get to our conversation with BSP artist Mike Truesdell, I wanted to throw a quick shout out about Dynamics Drums. Most people know Black Swamp Percussion for our lines of orchestral accessories and snare drums, but we also manufacture drum set style snare drums under the name Dynamics Drums. Many of the materials are the same, including our unibody solid shell drums bent in-house, BTW, our titanium shells, and our new medallion brass shells. But we also have some special features like our steel straight hoops, sterling silver inlays, wood air vents, and hand engraving done by BSP owner Eric Soy. You can visit Dynamics Drums on our website, www.blackswamp.com, or find us on Instagram and Facebook under @DynamicsDrums. That's @DYNAMICX Drums. Okay, the shout has officially been thrown out, so now on to our interview. Mike Truesdell is a percussionist and educator, recently appointed as assistant professor of percussion at Ithaca College. We have a chance to talk about his education and travels overseas, his new position at Ithaca, his pedagogy philosophy, So You Think You Can Dance, and more. Mike has been a Black Swamp artist for 8 years, and it's been a blast getting to know him personally and follow the trajectory of his career during that time. Hey, Mike. So here we go. How you doing? Should we do a mic check?
Great. Sure. Mic check. Well, you got one here on the line.
Right. So that was my mic check. So this is Mike Truesdell.
Yep. Check.
Thanks for calling in. And
of course.
Where are you right now?
I'm in the beautiful Ithaca, New York.
Okay. That was actually going to be my first question, if you'd moved to New York yet or not.
Yeah, I moved from Colorado at the beginning of the summer and flew out a little bit for Neef North Summer Festival in Knoxville.
Right.
But now I'm back for a week or so before I head down to New York City for the Juilliard Percussion Seminar.
Okay. And for those listening, you just recently got a job at Ithaca in New York. And so you're starting there in the fall of 2019. I'm not exactly sure when this episode's going to air, but so that's where we're talking about that. And you were previously at University of Northern Colorado.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And we'll talk about Neef North later and Juilliard.
Great.
But so you're in New York now, and obviously excited to get started there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to join this crew. Like I've been, we might get into things later, but I'm excited because my former teacher Dane Richardson also went to Ithaca College.
Right.
So this is a strange circle that I'm teaching in the place where my teacher learned.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of
strange paradox.
There's a lot of strange circles in the percussion community, so it's not surprising, but definitely cool. So you studied with Dane at Lawrence University, is that right?
Yeah, I loved my time at Lawrence University.
Okay. And you're from Wisconsin?
From Southwest Wisconsin. Yep,
okay.
A town called Verona.
Okay. And Lawrence is in Appleton, so how far away were you from there?
Yeah, it was about a 2-hour drive.
Okay.
I didn't really leave Lawrence ever.
Right.
I'm not really sure I ever left a practice room there when I was there, but I did go home, I think, at least once in my 4 years.
Yeah. So it was worth going home at least once.
I think my parents still recognize me.
Oh, okay. And so why Lawrence then? Because of Dane, or you had some other connections and ties there?
I mean, there's a lot of really great schools in the Midwest, and as I'm starting to figure out, a lot of people would like to stick close to home when they go to an undergraduate education. So,
sure.
Not all the time, but a lot of families choose to stay nearby.
Yeah. Even if they only do go home once in 4 years, at least you had the opportunity.
It was nice because my parents could come up and see concerts.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And see, they could drive up and see a percussion ensemble concert and come back in the same day.
Yeah.
But so it is nice for folks to stick around. So I had a lot of great choices living in the Midwest, like University of Wisconsin-Madison. Tony DeSanza is there. He runs a fantastic program.
Yeah, for sure.
I was looking at Northwestern when Mike Burritt was teaching there, and a lot of other really great schools. And I felt like Lawrence was a great choice for me because I had met Dane at Birch Creek Music Performance Center up in Door County, Wisconsin, when I was in high school.
Right.
And I felt like my connection with Dane and what he was doing with a really wide-ranging curriculum for undergrad was something that really spoke to me, and it's something that I try to do in my own teaching now also.
Yeah, so obviously a great influence. Backing up a bit, you mentioned Birch Creek, so you were heavily involved in percussion and performance from a young age, or how did you sort of get the percussion bug, I guess, if you want to call it a bug?
It's an easy bug to catch, I think.
Yeah, it's more of a virus.
Probably like smallpox, yeah.
You might need an ointment or some penicillin for it, but...
Right, we're vaccinated for measles, mumps, rubella, but not for percussion. Right. So if they can put that strain into the vaccination, that might be better. But yeah, actually my music for me started from a really young age. I started playing violin when I was 3.
No kidding.
My family's not musical by profession. My mom and dad are both retired, but my mom was a reading teacher, and my dad was a veterinarian.
Okay.
And but music was something that was really important to my mom's side of the family in the way that everyone on my mom's side of the family took piano lessons. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if you wanted to or not.
Yeah, you're strong on the learning your scales.
And it was rough for some of my family members. Yeah, like my uncle. There's stories of him just sitting at the piano weeping for the 30 minutes he was required to sit at the piano every day.
Right.
And my brother also had to take piano lessons, and he didn't really take to them so well, but he ended up becoming also a professional musician.
Okay.
So yeah, I started out in violin, took piano lessons after that. And then my first piano teacher was this fantastic woman named Vicki Jenks, who still lives in kind of north central Wisconsin now. And she was such a huge influence on me with with my piano lessons. And then next to the piano in her old studio was a marimba.
Right.
And you know how curious young people are.
Right.
So I think there was a time where I tapped on the low B flat of the 4 1/3 octave marimba with a pencil eraser, and that was, of course, not okay.
Right.
But hearing the sound of that marimba is formative for me. So then eventually I started taking percussion lessons with her.
Okay, so your piano teacher became your percussion instructor, and what's interesting about you playing violin is, as I've been talking to some of our artists and educators, this kind of starting with another musical instrument is a thread between them all, and a transition to playing percussion. Like Andrea Vinay was a violinist. Yeah. Adam Hopper, I think, also. Terry Longshore played saxophone. And
right.
I'm sure there's more. So, myself, I started, right in 5th grade playing percussion, and I guess I kind of, maybe it's naive, but thought that's how a lot of professional percussionists started, but
sure.
It seems I'm sensing a trend, so maybe not. I mean, have you come across more percussionists like in your travels or just whatever day to day that started with another instrument?
I haven't found a lot of folks myself, and that's awesome to hear about these other people.
Right.
I'm assuming that they're just littered about our field.
Right.
But I've found that a lot of my students will come to percussion either through the avenue of piano or through the avenue of drum set.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they're strong-armed, like we were saying, they're strong-armed into playing pitched percussion as they're a drum set player.
Right.
And then they find that that's really something that speaks to them. Or if they're a piano player, they probably have great reading skills and they have great pitch sense. And then sitting somebody down behind a drum set can be therapeutic for some of those people also.
Yeah.
So it's great. That's why I like Dane, because he's so wide in his reaching of curriculum that you're really not getting out of a 4-year undergraduate curriculum without making sure that you can play snare drum and timpani and excerpts and jazz drum set and a samba and whatever else, anything that guest artists will bring through also.
Right. Well, I mean, as far as getting a job in the future, diversity is key. like you have to be able to I mean, I don't they call it jack of all trades, but you have to master them all at some point. You have to at least be proficient, and have the opportunity to gig and play. And your diversity specifically is something I wanted to talk to, but
sure,
not yet. I want to keep moving through your sort of musical journey here. So. So Lawrence University, and then I did read that Dane sort of encouraged you to travel to Europe, like prior to going to either graduate school and then obviously moving on to a doctorate. So how did that kind of transpire? You went to Amsterdam.
Right. I think that it takes a lot of courage as a teacher to push your students away. And I mean, Dane was always really nurturing, and I mean, he's as close as a father could be, musically for me.
Mm-hmm.
And but still, I think as a teacher, and I'm seeing other people also, like there's a little bit of well, if you don't go down my route, then you're going to get off track, and then we're going to have to work harder, and you're not going to go down. It's not going to be efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And I happen to be more on the other side with this. That I think students should get a wide variety of inputs, even if it is confusing at the time. I teach a little bit at Rutgers University, and that program has a number of different teachers. So we have 4 teachers now, and then my Lawrence University program, I had 1.
Yeah.
So it could that could direct a student one way or the other for education, but I do think it's important to get a wide variety of viewpoints.
Yeah.
And when I was in my junior year, Dane said, "You have to study abroad." And I didn't really know what he was getting at, and I probably still don't really know, but I thought, okay, well, this is kind of a time, and Lawrence University has programs, places, so I should look to study abroad.
Yeah.
But I think what he was trying to get me to do is to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And going to a foreign country, and even though Amsterdam, you can speak English there, and the conservatory is an English-speaking school, but still there's a sense of I've really never been outside of just across the border in Mexico and maybe a little bit to Canada.
Right.
And here I am by myself getting off a plane with a suitcase in the Schiphol airport, not really knowing where I'm going.
Yeah, that's about as uncomfortable as you can get going from Wisconsin, all the way across the world to Amsterdam.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's more uncomfortable places on Earth, but like as far as like musically and educationally, like that's a pretty big step.
Yeah, and it was perfect for me. I really, once I got to to the school, which I learned that the Amsterdam airport isn't really in Amsterdam. So after I figured that one out, and I eventually got to the school, and I had a chance to connect with the teachers there. Jan Puschins was still with us then, and Gustavo Jimeno, who's now a great conductor, Peter Prommel, was kind of the reason I went over there, and the person who I really ended up studying a lot with was Nick Woud, who's the fabulous timpanist of the Concertgebouw Orchestra.
Right.
And those lessons are sticking with me, in my teaching even to this day. Even though it was only one semester, I feel like I tried to milk those teachers in that city and every opportunity that, it's a small, big city, very international.
Right.
So I got to see a lot of great music and meet a lot of great people there.
My wife, side note, I wouldn't say she studied in Amsterdam, but she did go to it was after she graduated with her undergrad. So it's like 299-ish.
Oh, wow.
And was there for 6 weeks or so. And she got a graphic arts, design degree, but worked with an artist there helping kind of catalog his works and curate some of his stuff. And he did large installations, like sculpture installations. So she, traveled with him a little bit around the Netherlands and helped install stuff. But mostly it was at his home, going through a lot of his prints and cataloging works and stuff. So, and it was sort of the same. She traveled by herself, but got on a plane and flew to Amsterdam and figured out where she was going and what she was doing. And he gave her a bike to ride around, and she basically lived in a little apartment, above his studio where he also lived with his wife. And Cyril Lixenberg was his name, but
great,
yeah, and he had connections to university here in the West Michigan, so that's where she went to school, and so he would come visit and work with students and some of the professors, and then she had an opportunity to travel there. So enough about my wife.
Wow.
But
no, that's fabulous news. But,
yeah.
But one more vote for anybody who's maybe a student who's interested in anything artistic or otherwise. Like it's just get out there and see the world, and don't wonder why or ask a question. Just get out there and choose a place. It doesn't have to be the perfect place, but get out there and just do it. Right.
No, I totally agree. I mean, the first time I went outside of the U.S., just like you, other than going to Canada, no offense to Canada, but I don't think it really counts, Eric, Black Swamp owner, and I traveled to UK last year for a drum show, and fun. I totally. I mean, of course, I've always wanted to travel abroad or go overseas, but like to be, in somewhere where, I mean, the U.S. has history, obviously, but to like the amount of history and the length of time that Europe and civilizations have been there is like really impressive and staggering. Like to just be around that much history and obviously culture and stuff. So I totally recommend it. I'm going back. It's received my stamp of approval. Traveling overseas, you should do it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Concertgebouw, Peter Prommel.
That's great.
Then Pierre Boulez. How did that transpire? You went to Switzerland?
Well, that was part. Yep, that was part of that Lucerne Festival Academy Orchestra. Okay. Which some folks, I don't know, it depends on when we air this, but it's coming up for some people, the kind of in the late summer, August, September.
Right.
And I was lucky enough to be there when Pierre Boulez was still conducting, and he still had a pretty good eyesight at that point, and I think he always had amazing ears. So I was, needless to say, I was prepared for that festival. I practiced pretty hard to be there because I I had heard about Pierre Boulez, and I knew that when he was the music director of the New York Philharmonic, he was notorious for his rehearsal method and how demanding he was on the podium.
Right.
But I was lucky enough to be there at a year when not only he was there and very involved, but they also had a tour scheduled for us to go out on a small tour with him conducting.
Mm-hmm.
So we worked, in addition to the large orchestra program that we were working on, we also worked on a piece of his called Sur un Six for 3 percussion, 3 harp, 3 pianos.
Okay.
Along with the Ensemble Contemporain coaches who know these pieces like the back of their hand. So yeah, we did that, and we had a chance to go off and play it in Essen, Germany, and a city called Mito, Japan, and we played it again at Carnegie Hall.
Yeah.
And maybe there's one more. Somebody will correct me on that, but yeah. So we had a chance to work really intensely with him, and that's an experience that I'll never forget and never have again.
Yeah, absolutely. So how long? So it was a single tour, or you were kind of there in residence, in a sense, or how long was that relationship?
Yeah.
I guess.
The Lucerne Festival Academy Orchestra is one of the great orchestral academies, and it's so different from a lot of the ones that we know about because it, yes, it is an orchestral experience, but it's an orchestral experience in music of the 20th and 21st centuries, more so than some other festivals, because that's the focus. It was Boulez's as the artistic director, and he was programming the music that was important to him. And now Matthias Pincher, I believe, is artistic director, and he's doing fabulous things also. But yeah, so you'd go over there, and you'd have, I think if without the tour, it was maybe 3 weeks long, ? But then, yeah, we stayed on for another couple weeks to go on these little outreach programs and do the radio shows and things.
Right.
And then we all went home, and we came back. So that was probably in September. We came back in January of the following year, and all played at Zankel Hall in Carnegie.
Right. Very cool. Were your parents able to go see you then, or they were like, we can't do this in a day, so so they traveled.
Came and saw that concert. Yeah, which was it was a double. The concert first half was Boulez's own composition Marteau sans Maître, which is maybe one of the most important pieces of the 20th century, and is in probably all history books. That if somebody's gone through like the music history course in college, they've probably heard this piece, and hopefully most people out there have played it.
And that's the piece you played in every location?
Well,
that was like the big seminal piece?
There's another group that went with us, and there's another group of fellows from this academy that played that piece as the first half. Then we had an intermission, and then we played this 47-minute piece that I played that was the 3 harps, 3 pianos, 3 percussion piece. And I've heard it a few times. It's been the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra has played it in concert a few times. It gets done at the venues where they have 3 pianos available.
Oh, okay.
That's probably the trickiest part.
Yeah, right. You gotta call the rental places.
Yeah, you gotta have a stage big enough to hold 3 grand pianos.
Yeah. Did you ever consider just staying in Europe?
Yeah, I thought about that, and I think anybody who's gone abroad has this same feeling that when you get there, you have this immediate shell shock of like, oh, maybe I made the wrong choice. Maybe I want to go home. I don't know if this is the right thing for me. I feel a little uncomfortable, especially if you're alone. And then if you get past that initial grind, then there starts to be the kind of the honeymoon phase, right? Where you say, like, everything is so amazing about this place. Look, they have this food here. And even if you have that same food where you're from, it's like better there. Right. and the people are cool, and they speak with this accent, and then now I'm learning their language, and we have cool streets. So everything starts to become interesting. And then I think for a lot of people, that interesting part becomes part of the norm. And then it's just a matter of like, I feel integrated into this society, and I understand how the things work, and I can understand public transport or whatever it is. And now I'm starting to feel comfortable here. And maybe if I go back, then I'm going to have the same thing back home where I don't really understand this culture, or I see things like, oh, well, Amsterdam kind of had this figured out. Why don't we have this figured out?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So there is a moment when like I came back around Christmas time or something, and I was so excited to see my family and be back home, and then I thought, I kind of want to go back. I was getting ready to live there. And I have been lucky enough to be able to go back a few times. We had a Zeltzman Marimba Festival there in 2010.
Sure.
I was part of the Tromp competition that year, so we were around that area.
Yeah.
And it feels good to go back, and it's also great to hear about what's going on in these places, and the students that are coming out of there, and meeting those people is also gives me a little nostalgia and pride that I'm part of that lineage.
Yeah, for sure. And before we get to you kind of coming back to the U.S., can you talk about the Tromp Festival? I mean, I'm familiar with it, but what? Yeah, how that works?
Okay, well, this is so it's just for everybody who's listening. If you're listening in the car on like not great speakers, it's spelled TROMP Festival.
Right.
And this is a festival that takes place in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. When I competed, it was the first year that they were doing it every 2 years. So up until my year, they were doing it every 4. And then prior, for a while in the 90s and such, the percussion wasn't the main attraction of the festival. Yeah. Every 4 years there'd be a festival, and 1 year it was solo trumpet, and 1 year it was string quartet, and eventually, kind of like Geneva or something, it would come around to percussion.
I see.
Well, they realized at some point, somebody made a decision, I don't know how that worked, that starting in 2006, maybe, then that would be percussion only, maybe 2002. Okay. Somebody with a Google can figure that one out for me, right. But so
call
I apologize. And we're taking Tom on line 1.
We're not quite there yet. Sorry.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, all of a sudden it's the Howard Stern show.
Right.
So then they decided it should be percussion only, and then starting in 2010 they started to do it every 2 years. So I believe on the even numbered years there's a Tromp Festival. And it involves a very large competition that draws 30 contestants from all over the world, and basically literally all over the world. Right. I haven't seen anybody from Antarctica yet, but that's about it. And but we're still waiting on that applicant.
Yeah, anything could happen.
Anything could happen. So those. And that competition brings in a jury of like everyone who we love and know in the percussion world, and also there's concerts that happen during the evenings that are. Mamadi Keita was one of the people who was playing a concert. Stuart Copeland played a concert during 2010.
Yeah,
they're amazing people, and the feeling of community that they have, and the kind of redirected interest, not in the head-to-head competition of I'm better than you at playing Rebond A, right. Kind of feeling is really strong there. They nurture a environment where people help each other out. We help each other set up. We go hang out after the rounds. If you don't make it, you sit in the audience and cheer on your friends that you just made. And it's great to meet the few folks from the States that I didn't know.
Sure.
But it's also really fun to meet people from all over the world and say, what's happening what's happening in percussion in Ireland or
Right.
Brazil or whatever. Like, I want to know these people, and that's how we make the world a little better place.
Sure. It sounds a lot like So You Think You Can Dance, but not anything like that.
Oh my gosh, I love that show.
Oh, you do? Oh, wait, I just found a guilty pleasure. I'm writing that down too. Right underneath Boulez is So You Think You Can Dance.
Yeah, if Boulez was on So You Think You Can Dance, I think I'd just retire.
Right, hang it up. There's nothing left to see or do now.
Yeah, right. He's the only one who could dance to mixed meter atonality.
And everybody would pay to see that. But
oh my gosh, it'd be amazing.
Right. But I totally appreciate what you're saying as far as the community and the sort of family aspect of it, because I think that can be missing sometimes. There's definitely, a competitiveness that I think can override just the more communal aspect of performance and playing. So I think it's super cool. Are you familiar with the World Percussion Group?
Yeah, I've heard about this. This is great. This seems like a really great community that's starting.
Yeah, and that, I guess, it's not this, the same as far as a festival or competition, but Poland percussionists from around the world. And sorry, I don't mean to be have this be a World Percussion Group plug right now, but it's a little bit of an endorsement.
Go for it.
Yeah, I think it's the same idea. They're pulling in these percussionists from really around the world and putting together amazing music and pieces and going out and touring. So, yeah, super cool.
Yeah.
So you're in Europe for a couple of years, and then your parents make you come home or something. I'm not sure how it transpired, but you end up ultimately come back to the U.S. and then I'm not sure what happens then. You go to grad school or what?
Yeah, that was I to be totally clear with the timeline. I had after I my first trip to Amsterdam, I came back and I spent a couple years not in school.
Okay.
And I will encourage people to do this almost always.
Sure.
Not always, but almost always. And I feel like I get a lot of questions about this if I go somewhere for a masterclass or something. Like, what should I do after undergrad?
Yeah.
I don't know what grad school to go to. And my thought is, if you don't know which grad school to go to, that's cool. And a lot of us have a few different options on the plate when we go to audition for a grad school. But if you don't really have a direction and you're just going on because you feel like that's what should happen, or somebody has done that ahead of you or told you what you should do, right. It's better to take some time off.
Yeah. And so what did you do during your time off then? Which I think is really great advice, to be honest, because I did transition directly from undergrad, whether, percussion performance degree. And then I was sort of in the same position. It's like, well, I want to keep playing. So maybe the best place to do that is going to grad school. So, and that's what I did. Sure. It seemed like the normal progression, but again, from talking to, our artists and educators, there also seems to be a trend where they didn't go to grad school right away, or maybe they did, but then they took time off before their doctorate and did some other playing and teaching or gigging or whatever. So where did you find yourself during that time?
Well, I was lucky enough to have very understanding parents, so I went home.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. I know not everybody's in the same boat, and I feel really lucky to have super supportive parents. I know not everybody has super supportive parents in music, right. Or they have differently supportive parents. Yeah. But I was really lucky because my parents said, okay, well, you can live here and kind of start yourself going, and they trusted that I wasn't just going to mooch.
Right.
And
maybe a little bit.
I was mooching like you couldn't believe. Right. I am the king mooch. But they had trust in me that I might eventually evolve into something worthwhile.
Well, I'm sure you've proven yourself by this point. You know, you got through high school and college and moving across the world. I assume they saw the value in what you were doing. So I think they probably believed in you.
Right. I think it's tricky for some parents though to really play the long game with that.
Yeah.
And my parents played the long game because they saw what I was doing and they said, okay, so here's a 21-year-old person who is going into music. We don't really know what jobs are available in music. Right. We see orchestra people play and we know that he's interested in that, but we don't really know what jobs are available, and we haven't seen any income come through the W-2 forms. So we're just going to let him work for a while and see what happens. Like, what awesome parents.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
There's definitely a leap of faith. Like, and I agree. Like, shout out to my parents. Like, they did the same thing. I mean, they were supportive.
That's great.
I'm sure just like you, all the way through, high school, attending all my marching band competitions. And then, even before I decided to study music in college, I was like, I'm going to be an engineer like my dad, and he kind of looked at me strangely and was like, okay. And then after a year, I was like, I am not going to be an engineer like my dad. Like, calculus is hard. So, and then he is like, well, I wondered what you were doing. Like, I think I want to go to study music. And my folks were like, well, duh. Like, yeah, that's what you do. That's who you are. So, And then they've always been super supportive going through school. And then, I got into Black Swamp, like on the ground level, and, they've always been great. So I totally hear you.
But I think that what you're doing and what Eric's doing, like the whole Black Swamp crew, like that's not something that's probably in most non-musical parents' wheelhouse of what a musician can do with their life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like create instruments for people. Is that really something that goes into people's heads first?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's such a cool, necessary thing for us.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, definitely not as a musician, and I mean, yeah, when I talk to people like, oh, I have 2 music degrees, and oh, really, what do you do? Well, I work for a percussion instrument manufacturer right now. Like, it doesn't really add up at first, but then it begins to make total sense because, I mean, I'm sure in your case, there's a lot of who and being in the right place at the right time, but there's also a lot of you've worked hard to kind of get where you are, and the same is the case for manufacturing or for my position, and it's an opportunity that came up, and I mean, I was basically Eric's, first official employee, when I was going to undergrad here, and so and we just kind of hit it off. And then I went to grad school, and he asked if I would, after I graduated, if I was interested in working full time. So then I became his first full time employee.
Wow!
And it was, because of the time and effort that I had put in, even though I didn't have manufacturing experience per se. I paid my dues and I worked hard. And when the opportunity presented itself, then I was able to kind of take advantage of it. But even then it was a leap of faith because, it's such a young company and you don't, exactly know where it's going to go. But I knew at the time, it was special. So that's why I was like, heck yeah, I will. And there was opportunity to play back in Michigan and then, I started a family, and 20 years later, I'm on the phone with Mike Truesdell. So Truesdell.
Right, which is probably the lowest part of that current resume.
No, it's all been a steady incline, to the top here. So
But I think I don't know what the audience is of this podcast, but if there's
it's mostly kindergartners, I think.
My gosh,
we have a large presence, sort of in the lower
and two,
lower elementary circuit of podcast listeners. So, no.
Well, if you'd like, I can do the entirety of the movie Aladdin. Would you like me to just start with that? But I think that if there's undergraduate students that are sitting out there, and I get this question all the time of what what am I going to do with this music degree? There's like 10,000 people graduating every year. I'm making up numbers, but there's a bunch of people that graduate every year for a very few amount of like spots in orchestras or teaching positions at universities, and it seems like the current university situation is starting to be very different from how it was in the past. So we have to be thinking much more different in now. So the people who are graduating, I feel like what I have to be doing as a teacher is I have to be preparing students for the world in 4 years, and not for the world that I experienced, which is tough to do. Because that means I have to be on the ground, I have to be practicing, I have to be working with people and listening and hearing what's going on in the performing aspect. But also there's this wealth of jobs that don't exist now that they could be perfect for when they graduate. Right? So I have to give them the skills to be able to go into instrument manufacturing or artist relations or whatever field that requires musical knowledge, but doesn't necessarily involve the striking of an instrument on stage.
So how do you do that? Like you
Well, you see, there's a potion.
What's that? You take this blue pill.
It's eyeball of newt.
Yeah,
and
right. But
I'm a vegetarian, so it's tofu. And
but you are in some sense trying to prepare your students for a wide spectrum of possible occupation. Like they are considering some sort of business route, or like you're saying, advertising or artist relations type of route. Like, do you incorporate this in your curriculum?
Yeah, well, I think that the biggest accomplishment I could have as a teacher in 40 years. I'm replacing Gordon Stout here in Ithaca, and Gordon has been teaching for an amazing 38 fantastic years.
Yeah, that's
so
wild.
I'm starting to think, okay, well, if I teach for 38 years, what does success look like for me?
Right.
And for me, I'd love to have graduates that are working in all different kinds of musical or maybe even non-musical ways, right? So music has the ability to prepare you to do anything that you want to do.
Right.
And I feel like that's why it's important for young people to study music. And not only is it maybe the surface interpretation where the person has an appreciation of how much time and energy it takes to play music, and maybe those people will eventually become folks who will go to a music concert or somehow donate to a music organization. Sure, music advocates, great. Yeah, so maybe they're those people, but I think that what music teaches you more than anything is it teaches you how you learn. And the time that you spend in the practice room by yourself working on something that is seemingly impossible.
Yeah.
And then having to overcome hurdles every single time in order to execute something in real time under the pressure of other people, and using that sound to communicate something that's different for every single person is no other field can accomplish that.
Right.
So that idea of diligence, dedication, time management, whatever else goes all into the bucket of teaching you how you learn. So
Right.
if I were to stop playing music today, I have confidence that I have the ability to teach myself any other skill that I need to know.
Right. I'll be honest, I've never thought of it like that. I've never thought, I mean, I think there is, like you mentioned, kind of surface things. Like I knew, like, uh, working hard and, and overcoming some obstacles, musical obstacles, and kind of transferring that to more real world applications, I guess. But, because there's a lot more that goes on in your life, even outside of music, that you can use. You can sort of draw from that confidence, and if you did decide to not pursue music, like I guess I'd never really put it in context like that. Like it would totally transfer over to whatever avenue you chose to pursue. So
sure, yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
Absolutely. And the skills you learn on like playing chamber music with somebody, how to lead and how to follow, and like really like give a clear cue to somebody. Like these are life skills. These aren't just music skills.
Unfortunately, in life you can't, or in music you can't just be like, I don't like what you're saying right now, so I'm going to cut you off. Like it's not like
you could.
I guess you could in music. Like, I don't like what you're playing right now, so I'm going to play something else.
It's happened to me on stage before where I played something and then, you'll play something and then a lot of times in music there's imitation and somebody hears you play and either they're absolutely zoned out and completely inattentive and they just play their own thing. But that is kind of a personality type that you have in conversation also.
Yeah. Yeah. But cool stuff. Sorry. What do we want to talk about next? I got some notes here.
Great. The world's your oyster.
Yeah. So let's see. Spectrum Trio. How does that fit in with your life and sort of arc of the percussion?
Well, you're hitting the timeline pretty solid right now because during these 2 years that I had off, that I took off from school, one of the things that happened was I started a percussion ensemble at my former middle school, and that was a chance to work with middle school students, and that was one of the great learning experiences of my life. For anybody who knows a middle schooler out there, like. It's an interesting teaching style that's needed for that age group.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And the other thing that happened that was rather large is I started a trio called Spectrum Trio with two of my greatest friends in the universe, John Dewing and Dane Crozier. Both were University of Wisconsin-Madison students with Tony DeSanza.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, they came out of that program with also a love of music from all over the world also.
Right.
And we had varying specialties and interests, and it was a great forum for all of us to get together and play and compose music for Percussion Trio in the lineage of Michael Spiro's famous trio called Talking Drums.
Okay, sure.
And that was 2 percussion drum set with Dave Garibaldi and Jesus Diaz. And then being a Madison person, I must give the shout out to Jamie Ryan, Josh Ryan, and Ryan Korb.
That's a lot of Ryans.
With the three of it's a lot of Ryans. I wonder if they thought about that. No. But interestingly enough, their trio is not reference to Ryan. It's called Africa West.
Okay.
So, and they still practice also, and I think they're still in residence at Baldwin-Wallace College, where Josh Ryan's the faculty there.
Oh, okay.
But so between those two things, we felt like, okay, we love what they've done, and we are hearing a lot of what they're doing in our music, but we're going to take a twist that's a little bit more Herbie Hancock, Headhunters, kind of style. Maybe there's some synth parts. Maybe there's some looping involved.
Yeah.
And what came about was Spectrum Trio.
Yeah. So basically, you're kind of taking like Cuban, Brazilian, African traditional music, and marrying it to some other influences that you guys have: jazz, rock, maybe classical. If I'm right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely you are. Yeah. And we recorded a CD back in 2009 or so that was a few of the pieces that we had written up to that point and played around, and we were playing bar gigs and little shows at like the botanical gardens, and we played at the airport once. Like fun shows where we can play for fun. And then we recorded this CD that is probably on Spotify. I don't even know what we did with that album.
Okay.
Well, here's the thing. If anybody wants a hard copy of the Spectrum Trio CD, just let me know, because we have
them.
I've got so many, and we have a contest of who can get rid of them the fastest. So if you're interested in the hard copy, just write to me and I'll send one to you.
Are they still in your parents' basement then? Like they're like, Mike,
enough,
when are we going to get rid of these CDs?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because my parents have now an infinite number of coasters in their house.
Right.
Coasters and Frisbees.
All right.
Yes. So that CD happened, and then strangely enough, we all started after I moved to New York, and one of the guys moved to Chicago, and then eventually I moved to New York, and then the other guy moved to California. So now we are almost literally the furthest distance you can be apart as a trio,
right?
And still be in the United States.
Sure.
So I guess somebody could move to Hawaii. Maybe that's me.
Well, I think you just volunteered yourself.
Okay.
I can think of worse places to move. So,
right.
I don't know. Can the students at Ithaca sort of study remotely then? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I'd have to talk to the administration about my living situation.
Right. Sorry, I'm on your Spectrum Trio website, and it says available on iTunes. And then cdbaby.com/CD/Spectrum Trio. And obviously, yeah.
All right.
And when was the last time you were at your Spectrum Trio website?
I'm gonna say it was probably about 2009.
Yeah, that's what this picture on the homepage looks like.
Yeah. I think it was that website was made with iWeb, so if that dates it at all.
And a quote at an endorsement from the Onion. What is that right? Am I reading that right?
Oh yeah. So if anyone, that's very possible. So most people know the Onion as this huge spoof news thing,
satirical news site, right?
Right, and I think a lot of people get their news from that. But if you didn't know the history of the Onion started as a very small newspaper in Madison, Wisconsin.
Really?
Yeah, and what we used to do on Saturdays during youth orchestra in high school is I would have to go and get a hard copy of the Onion newspaper, which was available all over campus. And you could, and if I brought that back to high school, I was all of a sudden the coolest kid at school.
Yeah. Well, it says here, thanks. This is the Onion's testimonial. Thanks to a well-informed group of influences that span from West Africa to Brazil, Spectrum Trio is one of the most inventive and resourceful local albums to come out in recent years. So I think this was probably like the beginning of kind of their satirical commentaries. I think this was probably like the first.
That's the first satirical thing that they wrote. Yeah. It was. Yeah, they didn't even listen.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I didn't know it started off as a legit newspaper in Wisconsin.
Well,
cool.
It wasn't legit. It was, but they did they had the articles that were the spoof articles, and then there was like Dan Savage at the back, who would write for that. But then, they had like album reviews and music stuff and stuff going around town. They would. Unfortunately for everyone, they would do a legit thing. So I'm sure everyone just skipped right over that review. But unfortunately for them, Yeah, we got to snatch it.
Yeah. And then I also saw online that one of the pieces you wrote, Ogun, was used in like some movie trailers or...
Yeah, this is one of the strange things that I've learned, that music isn't only this ephemeral thing that disappears because I've been spending my whole life playing music, but also it can exist outside of you. So, a few years ago, I was someone contacted me and said, "Hey, I heard this piece. Can we use it as the trailer to this movie that was so cool looking?" And I'm sad to say I didn't see the full movie, but the movie is about the first female Cuban boxer.
Oh, right.
And the trailer looks awesome, and I put it on my list to see someday. But so that's what happened with that piece. And then eventually, I think the next year, I was contacted, and that same piece was used as the theme song for Australian soccer.
Really?
I think the entire continent of Australia, like all the football clubs, they had a campaign that was called "You've Got to Have a Team," and it was this young boy named Yoshi, and he wasn't really sure who to root for with Australian soccer, and they said, "Well, you got to have a team," and then Ogun was playing in the background of these like 5 or 6 commercials, and they played it at the stadiums, and it was like kind of bizarre that my music was existing without me.
Yeah, how did they find it? Like just on
I literally think they found it on YouTube.
Yeah. That's actually pretty amazing that it was kind of filtered down and found and used in like 2 completely different applications. But so we're talking 2 percussionists and like a drum set player
and drum set, yep.
And then but you're also doing vocals and synthesizers, and you mentioned loops, which is totally cool. Like how did like these, like, again, I mean, we kind of touched on it at the beginning, like diversity of your kind of percussion influence. Like how were you drawn to some of those elements, and then to put them together?
Yeah, that's just, I think, comes from the environment that you put yourself in.
Sure.
So we were there, and it was most of the rehearsals happened in my folks' basement, and we kind of let ourselves loose and said, "Hey, we've got this opportunity. We love this music. How can we respect this music and these cultures, and also make something interesting?" And I think a lot of it's like a laboratory.
Yeah.
Like, we got to take these things and dissect them, and what's the part for this, and what's the segundo part for that, and hey, maybe I can orchestrate this quinto part onto drum set, and this is what I came up with yesterday. And then I'd say, okay, well, here's this marimba thing I was coming up with that's like, based on this bata rhythm. And then we'd come together and we'd say, okay, that doesn't work. Let's try something else. And John Dewing who's in California now. He was taking some jazz. He was a big jazz drum set player, and he took a lot of jazz harmonies and loved Herbie Hancock. Mm-hmm. And Dane Crozier loved Avishai Cohen, the great bass player, Israeli bass player. So some of those, we'd take that style and we'd say, okay, what can we do with this? And then we'd say, okay, well, what can we do with that? And yeah, I think we're still working on it, because, strangely enough, after 10 years after starting the trio, we actually just recorded the stems for a new album of all these new pieces.
So you do that all remotely then, like in your own location? And I mean, how does that work? Or do you literally got to get together in a studio and do it kind of live?
Yeah, well, we actually all got together, and we did it in Colorado with the fabulous audio engineer that we have at University of Northern Colorado, Greg Heimbecker. Okay. He has a great studio, and he gets great sound out of everything that he does. So yeah, we all got together, and of course the problem is that we're also friends. So when we get together, it's like, okay, it's rehearsal time. Hey, wait, did you hear about this thing that happened? Right. And so we know now that we budget one full day of absolutely no progress.
Basically just catching up, BSing.
Right. Yeah. Just getting, like, oh my gosh, this thing. And then now both of those guys are fathers. So then, it's 3 hours of looking at baby pictures and that kind of stuff.
Sorry about that.
No, it's, I love those guys. I love their families. I love music. So let's do it.
I have all my baby pictures out right now, and I'll just email them to you then. I'll text them.
We'll go through them one by one on the podcast.
Right. No. So this all, okay, so you're doing that stuff now, but when the Spectrum Trio kind of started to take shape, this was before Juilliard.
Yep.
And then you ultimately went to Juilliard for graduate work and then doctoral work. Was that kind of back to back, or?
Yep, that went back to back. And the 4 years of undergrad is a long time for somebody to be on, especially when you're 18 years old. And I feel like the undergraduate education is the time where you make yourself.
Yeah.
So if there's, I know everybody's in a different situation, and I feel bad about just saying this, but this is those 4 years are the time where somebody should get down to business and put your head down and learn absolutely everything you can learn. And you should be overwhelmed every day, and you should be tired, and you shouldn't make any money, and you should be expecting to just be saturated with information, so that for the next 40 years of your life, you're sorting out the information that you learned in undergrad.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like people get distracted, and sometimes they're distracted by things that are out of their control. Maybe family things come up or something. But if it's within your control, I would recommend not having a job. I recommend just I know this is bad. I'm going to get hate mail for this, but I think that we should go into debt during undergrad, and I think you should saturate yourself with absolutely everything that you possibly can suck from that institution, because you're going to pay for that knowledge, and you got to use the library, you got to go to biology classes, you got to go to the art installations, and you got to stay up late and get up early. And that's how you're going to get that information. And then if you feel like you're ready for grad school right after that, I really am sorry about your undergraduate education.
Okay. I need an honest answer. Is that how you were in undergrad then? Is that are you speaking from experience, or are you speaking from kind of a philosophy you've gained along the way?
I feel like I'm speaking from experience. Dane could probably tell you honestly what I was actually like there.
Right.
But I know that I think I smelled a little bit, and I have pictures of me with very large hair. Yeah. So I think I never got a haircut.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I felt like, okay, that was 4 years. Then I took my break, and I synthesized some material. Started Spectrum Trio. Then I felt like, okay, I want to go to grad school. New York's the place for me. Let's go. And I went out to New York. And then after, master's program is so short. I don't understand why this thing exists. You start and it takes you a year to get used to it, and then you're done.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Then it's your last year. So then I went right on to a doctoral program that was 5 years long.
Yeah. The complete opposite. You're like, why is this so long?
right. Yeah. It's okay, guys, let's wrap this up here. And I know there's some doctoral programs that are significantly longer, but
sure.
5 years was enough for me.
Yeah. And then, right. Did you get a job pretty close to after getting your doctorate, or was there a period there?
I think it was the year before, or maybe 2 years before I graduated. Oh, it must have been 2 years or something. I started teaching at Rutgers University.
Okay.
With the at that point, it was Joe Tompkins and Kyle Zerna, and Stefan Harris was teaching there then.
Oh yeah, cool.
And yeah, we've had a little bit of shift in the faculty now, but yeah, we just there's a lot of good stuff that's coming out of that program, but it's very different from what I went through because we all have little pockets of things that we teach. So like, there's a timpani teacher. I generally teach mallet percussion. Joe teaches everything because he's just so good at everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so then I started teaching at Rutgers University. And then a couple years later, I graduated and got a chance to move out to Colorado.
Yeah. Cool. And now Ithaca, obviously. So yeah, man, you're rocking. You're doing great.
I don't know. I mean, I love teaching and I love playing and everything. So it's fun to have a life in music for sure.
Yeah. I want to back up on a couple things. Your brother played percussion or is a musician also?
My brother is a fabulous jazz musician. Okay. He lives in New York City. He's lived there ever since he graduated from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities.
Okay.
So he's lived there and he's done he graduated from New England Conservatory and then he moved to New York.
Okay.
But he has something that's called the Gil Evans Project. Which is a big band that's dedicated to playing music of Gil Evans.
Right.
And for those of you who are out there who aren't aware, Gil Evans is not Bill Evans. Gil Evans is also played the piano occasionally, but he was really known as a composer and arranger and did work on like Miles Davis' Porgy and Bess, and he was involved with Sketches of Spain, and he also did a lot of arrangements of his own. My brother was introduced to Gil's music through maybe Maria Schneider, a great jazz composer in her own right, and she was, or Dean Sorensen at University of Minnesota, maybe, and so he got interested in Gil Evans and eventually made a connection with Gil's family, who lives in New York, and was granted access to go into Gil's closet and his artist loft on First Ave. And in the artist loft, there were sketches and pages and manuscript from pieces that had either been recorded once back in the 60s, or maybe they had never been recorded, or they'd only been played once.
Yeah.
And he was able to take these things, and through his knowledge of Gil's music, he was able to take these sketches that were all scattered about, and something would be on the back of another page, written out. Yeah. And he was able to compile these pieces that really haven't been heard in 50 years, at least, maybe never been heard.
Yeah.
So that's his project, and he's been going around and doing a lot of great work advocating for Gil's music now, and actually won Gil a posthumous Grammy a few years ago.
Well, I'm at the website gilevansproject.com. So your brother's name is Ryan Truesdell.
Ryan, yep.
Yeah. The Jazz Awards, Grammy Award winner, Grammy nominations. Wow, Mike. Your brother's almost as cool as you are.
Oh, he's way cooler.
Yeah, I'm getting that impression right now, actually.
Yeah.
So your folks were used to this then. Is he older or younger than you?
He's 5 years older than me.
Oh, okay. And was he a piano player? What did he do?
He played piano a little bit, and then he got interested in reeds. So he was a saxophone, clarinet player. Studied with the amazingly, monumental Eugene Rousseau at University of Minnesota. Yeah. Classical sax, but was really drawn to the jazz program and Dean Sorensen there. Then he went to New England Conservatory and studied with the legend Bob Brookmeyer for a couple years, and has worked as an assistant for Maria Schneider and Jim Hall, and worked for Bob Brookmeyer for a while, in addition to doing his own compositions. So now this Gil Evans project has taken over a lot of things. A lot of people are really interested in it, and that first album that I was lucky enough to play some marimba and timpani on, which was kind of crazy.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you guys ever collaborated or played together.
Yeah, we did that. There's, strangely enough, there's some timpani parts in those, and for anybody who loves Sketches of Spain, there's some fun snare drum parts in there, and those, strangely enough, those parts were played by Buster Bailey, who was Dan Druckmann's teacher, was my teacher's teacher.
Yeah, right.
So it's fun to have, like you said, those connections are coming out all over the place.
Yeah, another weird circle.
Yeah, right.
So is that Lines of Color, or is that a new album?
This is that one called Centennial that I played on.
Okay, I see that
and
here too.
I don't know if that thing still exists, but it was really fun, and there's some real magical moments on that album.
Maybe your parents will find like 300 or 400 copies in their basement, so they should go. They should go check.
Right? Yeah. Well, wouldn't that be great if I wasn't the only coaster in the house?
Right. You're the formal living room coasters, and then your brother gets the entry and family room. I don't know.
Well, that's how we choose the album covers. Is we have to figure out what the upholstery is in the living room.
Right. Yeah. It all has to coordinate.
Exactly.
Cool. One other thing I want to ask about is your connection to Niefnorf. That's Andy Bliss's project. Andy's a fellow Black Swamp artist. So how did you get connected with him?
Well, my junior year of high school, I was studying offhand with one of our family friends, who's a great drum set player, and he was also marching in the Madison Scouts, and he said, "Hey, you should try out for the Madison Scouts."
Oh,
drum and bugle corps.
Yeah, I forgot you marched.
Yeah, and so I said, "Okay, I'll do that." And I tried out for the pit, and they maybe had a small pool that year or something, or they were judging by height.
Right.
So
we need really tall guys this year.
I'm telling you, I think that's probably what I got. I got the draw. It's like choosing a basketball team.
All right.
Like maybe it was like the Madison Scouts versus the Santa Clara Vanguard basketball team was really,
right.
They needed that victory.
All right.
But so I got a chance to tour around with the Scouts for a summer in high school, which is great because I got to see, I don't know what it was that summer. It was something like 35 states or something.
Right.
I have the schedule somewhere. I can go check it out. But I got to see a lot of the country,
I'll wait.
And it was yeah.
Go ahead. I'm pretty much done for the afternoon. So whatever. Take all the time you need. No.
Well, you said that the kindergarten is the
right.
The main age group here. So I've got a song for that. It goes Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California. I can sing the song that goes through all the states in alphabetical order.
Okay, I don't have that much time, but
okay, here we go. Connecticut. Anyway, so
right.
But that was a great opportunity, and I met a lot of great people on that tour, but. Sure. One of them I actually just had a chance to see for the first time since 2002 when I was going through Bangkok, and he lives in Bangkok, Thailand, and so it's great to see make those connections.
Sure. But
the person who sat across the aisle from me on the bus was Andy Bliss.
Yeah, great. And so then he's like, in 20 years, I'm going to start the Niefnorf program. Like, would you like to be involved? But no, obviously you remain friends and had a connection.
Well, right. Andy's somebody who can, he's got such a great vision about everything that he does, and he really cares about music. So he was able to create all these things in the meantime, and one of them was Niefnorf. Right. So when an opportunity came to play, and he he had maybe seen some weird things I did on Facebook or something, and he called me up and he said, "Hey man, I know we haven't talked in 15 years or whatever it is, but could we do you want to play some Mark Applebaum?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I'm in."
Of course. Yeah. Well, what I think is cool, about Niefnorf is, I mean, Andy has, like I mentioned, a Black Swamp Artist, and he has been for a long time, like yourself, and he kind of was talking to me about it before it even got off the ground, and it started off as like a percussion festival, I think, or at least like performance and kind of a little collective.
Yeah.
And it was like the next year or 2 years later, he had multi-instrumentalists and composers and speakers, and it was like he already had it, I think, the scope of it figured out before it even got started. So yeah, it's pretty impressive. So
well, it's important to think a few years in advance, I guess, and Andy really does that. He really says,
sure.
By the time we're in the end of the second week of Niefnorf, he's already thinking, wait a second, so how do we do this better next year? And he's always asking and willing to take a risk, and you can see the result. It's a great festival.
Yeah. Cool. Well, before we kind of wind down, there's always some more topic-oriented questions I like to throw out if you got time for that.
Always.
Let's see. We kind of talked about success, I guess, and how you measure success, and it was you sort of mentioned helping kind of develop students on a varied career path. I mean, is there anything else as you've kind of been going through your percussive life, like anything you've metered or measured success by, or what it means to you, I guess? Or
I don't totally know. I don't have the answer to that, but I do feel like when I feel the most successful is when I'm doing projects because I love them.
Yeah.
And so, we all go through things, and we do things that we don't always know why we're doing something for a while. But the more projects I do where either I come up with them or somebody else, and I get drug into something, and sometimes you don't know that you're going to love it, but
you're right.
Like Niefnorf is something that I really care about, and it's so rewarding to be there. Yeah. And I was lucky enough to be teamed up with Nancy Zeltzman for the Zeltzman Marimba Festival for whatever it is, 15 years or something. And there's projects like that whatever everyone else feels they get from it, but I feel like those projects that I just love and I really feel like they make a difference, and I'm behind them, that's whenever I do that, I feel like I've succeeded.
Right. No,
and it's not all the time.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's part of it. That's failure.
Sure.
is basically like the learning is like the stepping stone to success. So, it's no, I totally hear you. Like in the manufacturing world, of course we can measure success, and we talk about this a lot. Like, not, sort of monetarily, I guess, or like trying to quantify some results of maybe a sale we had or a new product launch or things like that. But I always try to keep the perspective of totally making a difference or reaching musicians and percussionists and sort of affecting their life. And I don't mean like obviously in a positive way. So like providing them with the tools that they need to help express themselves or help make music and help them be successful. So when I hear those stories, or when I hear or would talk to people and that's happening, then I consider that success on our part. So totally makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think it's easy for folks to poo-poo the manufacturing companies sometimes and say, well, we are at PASIC, or here we are at this masterclass, and why are there these banners that are there? And I think it's easy for somebody to say, why are we, doing this, showcasing this commercialism right now? But I feel like, obviously none of us would be around doing what we do if it weren't for companies like Black Swamp.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
That are there, like trying to push and try. And I mean, have I ever been on a gig where somebody hasn't had a Black Swamp tambourine? I don't think so.
Well, if you did, you left.
Yeah, right. As
you
per my
walked
contract,
right out the door.
That's right.
No, thank you, sir.
Right. And I mean, they're all. It's a pervasive, brand in our field, but it's because you all are making these great products. And I was thinking about this the other day that I'm setting up my bass drum in my basement, and I think I am so glad that I've got these Black Swamp multi-legs.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean,
You're welcome.
a little, gloating for you guys, but that's the. I feel like it's easy to throw companies under the bus, but you all are so necessary for all of us doing what we do, right. And so thank you to you.
Yeah. Well. Yeah, I appreciate it, Mike. Yeah, you're welcome. So moving way back in time, was there an initial kind of trigger or spark for your interest in music, or like, I want to do this for the rest of my life, or was it a natural kind of evolution, progression?
I feel it's probably more the latter. Being put into, I don't remember a life where I wasn't playing music.
Yeah, sure.
So it wasn't really a spark, but I feel like my parents had a lot to do with it, because my mom is a reading teacher, and she's one of the great teachers ever in any field, I feel like. So I got a chance to learn from her. And then also my dad is so investigative in what he does. Mm-hmm. He just will try something and learn from it, and is really fearless in what he's interested in. So seeing that even in him now through retirement, I think, oh, okay, I really hope that I do what my dad does in that way. So those are kind of like the germs for hopefully where I've become, but I don't remember a spark.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll tell you mine, and only because we've referenced him briefly, and that was Stuart Copeland.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was sort of interested in percussion, I think, when I was younger, but my sister bought me a Walkman for you kids at home. A Walkman played cassette tapes. Yeah. And she bought me a Walkman for Christmas with Synchronicity and then the Police's The Greatest Hits albums. And I was like,
dang.
I was like,
game over.
Awesome. Yeah. Like, this is the coolest thing. And like, and I knew I was kind of interested in percussion. I was literally, it was like 5th or 6th grade. So maybe I was in band already. I kind of forget, but I was like, I am going to be connected to this for the rest of my life. So, yeah,
dang.
That was me. So shout out to Stuart Copeland.
I can understand
again.
that.
All right.
Yep.
Cool. Is there anything that keeps you motivated or enthusiastic or inspired that may be inside or outside the music field? Or where do you draw inspiration from?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of I think it's important to note that there's life outside of music.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been the greatest at that in my life, but I have been interested in reading some Stephen Hawking books about astrophysics and the universe, and now Neil deGrasse Tyson is really taking that charge, and he's got a fabulous book out there. So I think there's something that's universal, so to speak, in what they're dealing with. That Hey, it's Mike coming to you in the morning.
Yeah, right.
So, but I think there's something about how they are looking at the way that planets and galaxies and interact with each other and how we communicate with, in that way. And then also how we're looking at the inside of an atom and how those particles will work together and cooperate or not, and how that builds the whole world, right? So I feel like if you're feeling like there's a lull in your music making or otherwise, and you don't want that lull at the moment, I think there's always something to explore. So you can really zoom out and see how these large things work together. Like, how do these pieces work on a program, or how do these programs work to become a series? And then you can also, really zone in and say, like, what's the material that's inside of this mallet? Or, how did they attach this tambourine head? And like, is there another way to do it? Can I do it? So I feel like there's always cosmic and quantum scale to everything that we do, and it's something that can always keep you motivated, I think.
Yeah, very exploratory. I wouldn't say I've immersed myself in Neil deGrasse Tyson, but I've sort of followed him a little bit. He's got a podcast, Star Talk, that I try to check out, sometimes, and I've never been like a huge kind of astrophysics buff, but even through childhood, been fascinated with obviously the scope of everything, and I think it does kind of help put life in perspective sometimes. So I think it's cool.
Well, I'll tell you, here's the fun little fact of the day. If you want to feel like we're a little bit smaller, is I was reading about this tornado that's happening on Jupiter right now, and the tornado is something like 12,000 miles across, or 12,500 miles across, and which is I think it's like 2 to 3 times the size of Earth.
Right.
Is the size of this tornado, and it's been happening for something like 400 years. So I was thinking, got it. Check.
Right.
I'm going to go work on my snare drum roll.
Right. We had a thunderstorm last night. That was pretty exciting.
There's lightning.
Yeah. The scope is amazing sometimes.
Right.
Any other hobbies then besides studying tornadoes on Jupiter?
No. I mean, what's really interesting to me is, now that I'm living in Ithaca, it's the first time I'm kind of like, working on my house. So if anybody has any house tips, this kind of stuff is interesting. And then I like reading. Like I said, my mom's a reading teacher, so I woke up the other day and I thought, I don't know anything about Stonehenge. So then I went to the library and I got a book on Stonehenge, and it's been interesting to kind of dabble in these different topics. So I run occasionally.
Only when somebody's chasing you, or like for fun?
Somebody's chasing me a lot.
Yeah.
It's not good. Not a good scene here. Yeah. But no, I like to run. I ran a couple half marathons last summer, and I'm starting to kind of get the run itch. So heads up.
You'll be the next Forrest Gump, maybe. I don't know.
I would love that.
Yeah. Well, that's all I had written down. So
great.
I think I'm done, Mike. No, I'm spent.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for the time, Tim.
No, I thank you. It was great talking to you. I learned stuff I didn't know about. I learned stuff I didn't want to know about, and I learned more about what I already kind of knew, if any of that makes sense. But
thank you.
Yeah. No, so you're doing awesome things, and congratulations on everything. So cool. Thanks for calling in.
Thanks. Yeah, well, thanks. I appreciate the time, Tim. Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
This has been a BSP production, recorded and produced out of the Black Swamp Percussion facilities in Zeeland, Michigan. Audio assistance by Nathan Coles. and music by Adam Hopper.
Okay, all you got there in Radio Land. This is Mike